What is up, everybody? Welcome in. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we are starting a brand new series, Coffee with a Cop Behind the Badge. My journey from being a college golfer to a police officer to an online video game streamer and everything in between. There's a lot to unpack there. I cannot wait. Let's hop on in. All right. Thanks again for tuning in. I have been looking forward to starting this series for a while. I started streaming online a couple years ago. And when I did, I was still a police officer. And people would ask, hey, what do you do when you're not streaming video games? So it came out that I was a police officer and that I retired shortly thereafter. Lots of questions. Everybody wanted to know something about the job because there's a lot of mystery sometimes behind what is it that a cop does from day to day. And I kind of got this idea that maybe this would be something interesting to talk about it. In my opinion, I've had a pretty cool career. I've been lucky and I've been blessed enough to do quite a different variety of jobs on the police department. We've talked about some of them on stream and some of them in some other sidebar conversations with some folks. And I just thought it would be interesting to start putting some videos out. So the plan with all this, like what's going to happen in the future? Well, here's kind of like my idea. I would like to put a video out once a week. This first one, we're going to kind of just talk from a 30,000 foot view about my career, what I did on the job, how I got on the job, and just some little nuggets here and there. And in the future, we're going to talk about different aspects, different assignments I had on the job. And then I'd like to bring in some other folks that I've worked with or other law enforcement officers that I know from around the country and just their experiences as well too. And then also dive into the military world as well. I've got some friends and family members who had some great careers with the military, and I would love to talk with them as well too. So what did I do and how did I get here? Well, like I said, I was a college golfer. I was working at a golf course. This gentleman who used to come in and play golf a couple times a week, we were talking one day and he said, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? Now, in my mind, I had kind of already been grown up. I was about 21 years old, maybe 20 at the time. And I'm thinking there, I'm like, man, I'm an adult now. I'm grown up. But deep down, there was something that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a police officer. Both of my grandfathers were retired police officers. I've got a couple uncles who were police officers. My dad worked at the prison. And so law enforcement was something that was just, it's what I grew up with. And it's always what I wanted to do. One of my grandfathers was a homicide detective, and that's specifically what I wanted. I wanted to get on the department, and I wanted to be a homicide detective. I grew up watching Homicide: Life on the Streets and NYPD Blue, and Andy Sipowicz was like a spitting image of my grandfather. And that's kind of what drove me to really want to get into law enforcement. So I kind of explained that to that gentleman. He said, well, if you want to be a police officer, my daughter works on the police department in employment services, and she helps and hires the new guys who get on the department and gals as well too. So he got me in contact with her. I put my application in. I go through the hiring process, which took about 6 months. And next thing you know, I've got an academy date. I start the police academy on June 9th of 2003. Just looking back at it, I can't believe it was that long ago. But yeah. Started the academy not really knowing anything about what to expect. And let me tell you, the academy, for somebody who never was in the military, I was extremely scared on the first day. You pull into the parking lot and everybody, you're not allowed to get out of the parking lot. You got to stand at the back of your car and just wait there. And then you're waiting there and waiting there and waiting there at attention. And then all of a sudden, the class sergeant and the RTOs, they come out there just yelling and screaming. And I was like, holy cow, this is the real deal. Like we're no jokes. We're playing for keeps on this one. The academy was a lot of fun. It was 16 weeks long. I enjoyed it. It was tough. It was hard. I had never polished shoes before. And let me tell you, I got pretty darn good at polishing shoes. I was the tallest guy in my academy and I went through in the summer. So by the time the inspection officer came around to me, my boots had been baked in the sun. So I got gigged every single time on my boots because I'm standing there in the hot sun. It didn't matter if they were mirrors beforehand. By the time they got to me, my boots looked trashed. And my class sergeant, now I'm tall. I'm just over 6'3". So I don't look up to a lot of folks on a day-to-day basis. My class sergeant, I had to look up to him. And he had this deep, deep voice that would rattle your insides. And he would look down at me and say, "Why are your boots that way?" And just as you would say every single time, "Sir, I've got no excuse. It won't happen again." But sure enough, it happened again. Happened every single time. Something that you just couldn't get around. And he knew it because he was the tallest guy. He later told me that he thought it was funny because he remembered being in my exact same boots when he went through the police academy. So again, the academy was 16 weeks long. After that, when you graduate, I went and I was now an officer in training. Now, what does the police academy teach you and what doesn't it teach you? It gives you just this overview, kind of like what we're doing right now about what this series is going to be, about what being a police officer is all about. And then you go out there and you're literally OJT in it. You're on the job training, figuring this thing out. I was 21 years old when I graduated the academy. I really didn't even know what I was doing half the time. I was nervous. I was scared. I had people coming up to me and say, "Hey, does your dad know that you took his uniform today?" Because I still looked like a kid. I still had a couple pimples on my forehead. I mean, it was just ridiculous looking back at it that I was doing that job. When I graduated the academy, I was 176 pounds and I was 6'3". So I was pretty much had to stand twice just to even make a shadow. But it was amazing. I loved the career. Kind of like what we'll get into as well for some of the different things that I did on the job is obviously I was in patrol for quite a few years. I became a field training officer, which is I trained the new folks who came out of the police academy, which was great to kind of build up and train that next generation of police officers, your next backup. I had the opportunity to train. After that, I tested for detectives and I became a child crimes detective where I handled physical and sexual abuse cases against kids. Now, that was a very challenging yet extremely rewarding assignment that I had on the department. I did that for a few years, and then I moved over into a task force with the Internet Crimes Against Children. And we hunted down and arrested the individuals who were trading the most heinous images and videos on the internet, and we put them in prison for the rest of their lives. My part of that task force is I was a computer forensic examiner. So I had to go through all of the electronic media and electronic devices and find all of this stuff. Identify the yet unidentified victim. That was my job. Again, very, very difficult, very tough. Things that I saw and heard I will never forget for the rest of my life. But it was very, very rewarding. And I cannot wait to get into some of those stories and talk about that, how it's impacted me to this day about some of the stuff that I went through. From there, eventually you're going to kind of get to your tipping point where my glass was full on that. I really couldn't handle it anymore. And I was lucky enough to test and get into our air unit, our air support unit. We have helicopters and helicopters and airplanes on our police department. And I became a tactical flight officer in the helicopter and in the airplane. That was the most fun that I ever had on the police department. It was super fast paced. It was extremely, extremely rewarding getting up there and doing these high speed pursuits, foot pursuits, vehicle pursuits. Being basically a police officer from an aerial platform is kind of how I described it. It was a lot of fun. Towards the end of that, that's when I kind of started streaming right towards the end of my career. I never had a plan of leaving at 20 years. However, there were some things that happened towards the end of my career, getting sick and losing some opportunities that we'll get into as well too, that kind of opened the door for streaming. I needed an outlet as well too from all the stuff that I was carrying with me from child crimes, and kind of fell into online streaming as a way to just kind of disconnect and find an outlet. And it was amazing. And that's kind of where this whole series kind of came from. It would come out that I was a police officer or a former police officer, and people always had questions. And I would answer them. I was an open book during my live streams. There's topics that are things that you don't go through. There's a lot of anonymity on the internet. However, I wanted to be as open as I could, talking with the community that I was trying to build, and just let people know a little bit about what was going on. And with all of those questions, it got brought up that maybe you should do this series and kind of like lift back that veil And so this is where all of this kind of came from. So I want to try to put out an episode every single week, maybe every 10 days. Again, I'm not contractually obligated to put these out. However, I do because I want to memorialize some of these different stories and events that are in my career. Whether it's, saving a kid a couple days before Christmas and giving them the best Christmas present that they never knew, or what it was like getting involved in officer involved shootings. And yes, that's with an S as well too. Some of the things that we know happen in the life of a police officer, but sometimes it's not necessarily talked about unless you know somebody or you were involved in it yourself. How I handled those situations, how my family helped me with those situations, how I want to help new police officers or current police officers in those situations. I've got lots of friends who are around the country who are in law enforcement as well too, and I'd love to bring them on, get their perspective, see what they have to say, some of the things that they went through as well too. And then also from the military, we're not just going to be behind the badge, we want to be behind the uniform as well too. The life of a military personnel. There's a bunch of videos and movies and books that are out there that talk about law enforcement and military and different things. But just having a raw, uncut conversation and talk about what happens on the job. We've seen lots of different ones, like I talked about. There's NYPD Blue. There's the most realistic police kind of show that's ever been on TV, Reno 911. Extremely realistic for police. But obviously that's for entertainment. So when it's not for entertainment, when it's for keeps, when it's real life, where the rubber meets the road, those are kind of the conversations and the topics that I want to get into. If the most horrific thing happens to your kid, not their lunch money was taken or the ball was taken at the playground, those are things that need to be addressed as well too. But as a parent, the one thing that you don't want to happen to your kid, if that happens, how can we talk about that? How can you broach that subject with your kids to, one, get the best information you can, and two, the most important, protect that investigation so that person who hurt and harmed your kid can go to prison for the rest of their life. Because that's my main goal. I want to put these people away forever. And that is what I want to help you do as a parent as well too. That's one of the topics we're going to talk about. So I can't thank you enough for hanging out this long, listening to this. I can't wait for the next episode. I think we're going to go into the life of a patrol officer and what it was like on a day-to-day basis of just kind of like shagging calls, being on the radio. I worked third shift, I worked second shift, first shift, different parts of the valley as well too. So kind of get into those of what it was like. Folks, I am live streaming all the time. What I would love to do is somebody hop in, say you found the channel from one of these videos, say hi. The best thing you can do on the internet to help out a channel like this is hit that subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment as well too. You don't know how much it actually does help the content as well too. And I can't thank you enough. I can't wait to do the next one. I can't wait to see you. Put down in the comment what was your favorite part? What would you like to see in the future? And like I end everything, stay safe. God bless. Know who's got your six, and I better see you on the next one.